This is the Roller Coaster Podcast. We are here to help you be empowered and renew your sense of purpose as a midlife mom. This is your time to redefine and reclaim your power as a woman. Just because our kids are getting older doesn't mean that our lives still don't have crazy twists, turns, ups and downs. And that's not to mention what our hormones are doing. We're navigating helping our kids plan their next chapters while quietly wondering, what the heck does my next chapter look like? My name is Lucy Q, wife, mom, podcaster, and journaling mentor. This is a crazy time in your life, but you are not alone. So I'm inviting you to throw your head back, arms in the air, and come along with me for the ride.
Life is like a roller coaster, baby, baby. Roller coaster. I wanna ride, ride, ride. Roller coaster. Life is like...
This is the Roller Coaster, and I'm your host, Lucy Q. Now, something that we've been chatting about for a while on the roller coaster is how many women experience something more than the physical aspects of midlife. It's common to also experience a spiritual awakening. For me, it was a stirring deep inside, something awakening that felt new yet familiar. Something was drawing me to have a deeper understanding of who I was and why I was here. My journey began to open up as I established a journaling practice and started exploring meditation, tapping into lunar cycles, and a wisdom that mainstream seems to have forgotten. Yes, I was becoming more of what you call woohoo, but it felt normal and like home to me. And for a while, I was reluctant to share it out of fear of being judged or even persecuted, because it's not like that's never happened in history before. It was part of who I am. And like many midlife women, we're stepping out into the open and sharing this incredible journey. Joining me today is Michelle Milne, who has been sharing her midlife awakening on her blog, Spiritually Situated. Welcome, Michelle.
Hi, Lucy. How are you doing today?
I'm great. I love conversations about the spiritual awakening that happens in midlife.
I am so excited to share my experience. I was listening to your opening there, and so much of what you said is true. The woo. How do you say it?
Woohoo. But
yeah.
It's kind of, and I am a little bit embarrassed to say it's something that I almost made fun of for a while.
Yeah, I get that. I get the word that you used. And then also when you were talking about that fear of judgment, one of the reasons I'm putting myself out on podcasts is because I do have that fear of judgment, even to this day, even with a website out there and being a psychic medium, I still feel that judgment. And in my everyday life, I don't talk about it that much. So this is a real opportunity.
Well, why don't you start by sharing your journey, what you went through?
Okay, well, I think to understand right now, we just have to go back a little ways, 50 years, because I'm 51. And as a child, I had grandparents who always shared these wonderful paranormal, supernatural stories with me. So it was always part of my childhood. They would talk about, they saw Bigfoot. They would talk about clocks that hadn't worked for years suddenly starting to work after someone passed away, reincarnation. So these are all stories that as a child really fascinated me. So from a very young age, I had a fascination with the paranormal aspect of things, but that's all I understood it to be. Is like, oh, all these really cool things could happen. There's a possibility of it. And it wasn't until my grandma passed that I had my first experience, and I was the only one home in the house. And in the distance, I heard someone call my name, and I knew immediately it was her. And I was like, oh my gosh, like there's something to this, but still not really getting the other part of it. So I started empty nesting in 2017. And then in August of 2019, my spiritual awakening happened. A bunch of synchronicities lined up. Things happened I ended up at an airport many hours before my flight. And I'm not one to sit. So I put on my headphones and I decided to walk the airport, get my steps, trying to stay healthy while traveling. And I was listening to a podcast, and their guest was an aura reader. And I was fascinated. And I just couldn't wait to find out more information about her, more information about this aura thing. And that night we were in Las Vegas, we were staying at a hotel, and I had a dream of my grandma. And she was there. Like, I could feel her, I could smell her, I could hug her. And when I woke up, there was a light strobing in the room. Like, it was just amazing. And when I woke up, my whole mind shift, or my whole mind had shifted to a different perspective. What I understood going to bed no longer seemed to fit when I woke up, if that makes sense at all. It was just waking up and having the realization that, yeah, all those experiences are something, but there's a lot more to this. And it's just been walking this journey ever since.
So yours was almost like a switch being flipped from off to on.
Exactly. Like, as I said, it was always there. And when my kids were young, so when I was in my 20s, I started to step into it. And I was very interested in angels and the stories of their healing and everything like that. But the timing wasn't right. And so it kind of got put on the back burners. I'm running my kids everywhere they have to go. I'm doing my job as my husband's wife, going to all the dinners and, the functions there. So I kind of lost my own identity and had to put that on the back burner.
That lost your own identity. I think that's something that a lot of us midlife mothers are realizing, wait a second. And I think that's that initial stirring is like, wait a second, who am I? It's, you do, and I'm not saying that there's anything wrong or it's bad, but that part of our life, our mothering years, we're putting everything that we have into that. And a lot of us do lose that sense of self. And then as you said, as the nest empties, that's when it starts coming back. And for me, it was scary because I didn't know who I was. I don't think I ever knew who I was. I met my husband. I was 18. He's 5 years older. And I went from living in my parents' house. I moved in with him. We got married. A few years later, we had kids. I never had that time to actually figure out who I was. And I think that's why it was so scary when I went through it at 44.
And I walk shoes very similar to yours. I met my first husband when I was 19. We got married at 21, and I had my first child at 22. And so really, I went from being kind of a bratty teenager to a married woman to a mom very, very quickly, and didn't have time to really figure out who I was. And then it didn't work out with my first husband. Again, I was very young. So I had to deal with that too, kind of trying to figure out this co-parenting stuff, which took a lot of time. It was a lot of frustration, and I'm happy to be on the other side of that also.
And for me, it's been, sort of I'm going to go back to sort of my first glimpse at something else was in it would have been the mid 90s when X-Files came out. I don't know if you ever used to watch that show.
It scared me. I didn't.
Oh, we loved that show. Like, we started planning, it was Friday night, and we didn't do anything Friday night. And if we had to, we were recording it. It was like X-Files was our thing. And that really started to show different aspects of, wait a second, there's more to this world than what we think. But it was still very much, a lot of people still consider that, oh, it's just make believe. It's not real. So you kind of talked about it, but you didn't really, because, people thought you were crazy. And I think when it started becoming more of a reality was when my youngest was about 3. He had a couple of incidences where we realized that he was seeing, what we call dead people. and he would have conversations with them. And then he started seeing orbs in his bedroom. And I was with him once, and I saw the orbs, and I'm like, okay, this is a thing. And at the same time, I started having visitors in the night. Like, you remember when your kids were little, even though you were fast asleep, you would know if the bedroom door opened and somebody was walking in your room and somebody needed your help. It's just kind of like this instinct you have as a mother. I would have all of that, but there's nobody there. I could even feel somebody sitting down on the bed beside me, but there was nobody there. So it was stirring then. But like what you shared, I was too busy to really pay attention to it. And I think the real person that I started following and listening to was Sylvia Brown. I really liked her practical approach to things. It just made it seem more normal. And then really it's been unfolding throughout the last 5 years. And I think what I have, you know, more pronounced than anything right now is what you would call a clear knowing. There's just things that I can't explain. I just know it to be true. And sometimes I voice it and sometimes I don't. And when I voice it, people are usually like, usually my husband or my kids are like, oh God, I hate it. You're always so right sometimes. I'm like, sorry, I can't help it. I just know.
And I, for the longest time, didn't even know. I mean, I know about the different clairs, but I didn't even realize how much I relied on that clair knowing, the that portion of it, because a lot of the information I pull in is from just knowing. I mean, I do feel I'm an empath, and
Yes,
I kind of thought everybody was always like that. Like when people
I
would say, "Oh,
know.
you're so moody," or this and that, I thought people were just like me. They were sensitive like me,
Yep.
and that has been a rude awakening since starting the spiritual. Well, I guess it's been both a rude awakening and nice knowledge to finally have, because now I don't always look in like, what did I do wrong? Like, why aren't they responding like I would respond? Well, they don't see the world the same way you see the world. And it's as easy as that. So, and then also what you were saying about children, I had a son when he was 2. We were taking a nap and he woke up from the nap before I did and was walking around the bed, patting it, laughing. And then all of a sudden his eyes became fixated and he started saying, "Little boy, get out of my mom's room. Little boy, leave." And talk about freaking out. Like, you're home alone with your little kid and he's talking to a little boy that you don't see. So that was an experience early on that I was like, wow, like there's something to all of this.
There is. And even with, everything I'd experienced and shared up until, my sort of midlife point, what I was actually going through, in call it greater detail than I had before, I was still reluctant to share it with my husband for sure. Because I mean, we were always like on the same page in general or certain things, but when you kind of go into, the I guess the next level, that's when you're like, oh, is he gonna think I'm batshit crazy, or is he?
I'm with you there too. I've had to walk that walk in my life. And just, I think as I started to change and embrace like a different Michelle, there were some growing pains there, because he worried a little bit, well, maybe she's going to outgrow me, or maybe we're not going to have as much in common. But I always saw it as a chance to get closer in a different way. And he is super supportive. I am so lucky to have him there in my corner. It was funny, one time I was outside and I was in a hot tub and I was talking to my guides. I was talking to the universe. I was telling them how grateful I was. And I didn't know he was watching me, but when I came in, he's like, Michelle, I've been around you enough to know the stuff happens, but when we have company over, could you not talk to yourself out in the hot tub? And I'm like, oh, I wasn't talking to myself. I was talking to my guides. And he's like, oh, I should have known.
Even better. Yeah. But that's it. There's these little quirks. And I think my husband's caught me. He's like, who are you talking to? I'm like, I don't know, just my people. Like, Don't worry about it. Just ignore me. And he does. I mean, he is, I'm the same way. He's very, very supportive. And sure, there's some stuff he just looks at me and he's like, okay, sure, do your thing. But he's very supportive. And when he sees things like, salt dishes placed around the house, he'd be like, and what are you doing with that? I'm like, oh, I'm just sucking all the bad energy out. Don't worry. He's like, okay, cool. And
D-
when I do little things, he's getting used to it.
Does he ever question you, like when there's a full moon and you put all your crystals in the path of the moon at night, like in a windowsill or something to charge them?
Well, I do. Well, my main crystals are on my window anyways, so they're always out there. Um, but no, I do moon water.
Okay.
And it was funny. My son, one of his friends came over. He's like, "What are you doing with that water in the bottle?" I'm like, "Oh, that's my moon water." He's like, "Oh yeah, my mom does that too."
And
And
see,
it's way more common than we think. All these little things, and you know what? Quite honestly, whether or not they are, let's just say they are actually real or not, does it matter? If it's bringing you joy, if it's bringing a different layer to your life, does it matter if it's perceived as real or not? You know?
not in my opinion. I've learned to really pick and choose my audience. I know the people I can talk to about it and the ones that I shouldn't talk to about it. Um, and I was
Yeah.
going to say something else, but I'm having a moment. I'm
I
forgetting
was
what I was going
I
to
was gonna
say.
say, yeah, definitely. I'm one of four kids, and all my siblings were all married and we all have kids. By far, I do not talk about any of this stuff with my birth family. My husband and kids, yeah, we talk about it. My oldest son, yeah, he's in tune, and he follows his astrology and lunar cycles and stuff like that. My younger one, he's still sort of figuring out certain things. Some things work for him and some things don't. But outside of that, yeah, my family, they definitely think I'm on that woohoo side for sure.
Yeah, it's caused, a couple discussions, but all those discussions for me have done because I really try to look at the bigger picture and be respectful of people and where they're at is made me go deeper and search for my own answers and how to take my religious background and my foundation and how to merge that with my spiritual um, beliefs and like what I see around me and the experiences I have. And yeah, it's taken a lot of inner work. It's taken a lot of meditation, journaling, all of those things to get to a point where I'm comfortable about it and I accept that of me. And to make sense for me, I've really just had to put it in the context. I just filter my information different than you. And I'll just respect where you're at. Please respect where I'm at. And we can find common ground.
Yeah, and you brought up religion, and I think it's important to take note of that because there's a lot in established religion that would declare these practices to be witchcraft. And historically speaking, we know where that went. And I think that's why so many women do kind of keep this stuff secret, is because it is in a lot of circles considered to be witchcraft or anything like that. But really, if you go back further in history, everything that we're doing was essential to your tribal life, your tribal community. Understanding the lunar cycles, all you have to do is look at some of our ancient buildings and ruins around the world. They're all focused on aligning with stars, moons. What do you call the energy lines? Oh, what are those called? I forget. It's all connected, and it's like, wait a second. Sure, there's this few hundred years where modern religion was established that is void of a lot of these practices. But if you go back even further in history, they're all there, and they're all the things that we're trying to figure out now. But they still want to take away mystic side of things. They want to categorize and analyze something instead of it just, being part of the overall energetic force.
Exactly. I feel it and I see that force all around me. And I'll tell you, when I first started seeing things outside my body, I did go to the eye doctor several times to see, do I have a detached retina? Like, what is going on? Because I do see a lot of shapes around me. I see sparkles around me. I see colors around me. And yeah, that's the first place I went, is it must be a physical condition. And once I ruled that out, I'm like, I can't deny it. So I've got to find a way to make it make sense in my mind. And it doesn't match up perfectly, but I can find balance there.
Yeah. And, it doesn't, I sometimes refer to myself as my human self and my spiritual self.
I do too.
The
That
side
makes sense.
that came here to, be in this human body and have this human experience. And, I sort of chuckle because our human selves want to make sense of stuff. And I can hear my spiritual side going, "Oh, you silly human. You don't need to make sense of it. It just is."
Yeah. And it's all universal timing, which for me, I'm a type A personality in my human life, but to let things go in my spiritual life and just accept that when the universe says it's the right time, it's the right time. I can't speed it up no matter how much I can help myself, but when the universe decides it's right, it's right. And that's been really hard too, is being patient with the whole unfolding process. And also when you think you have it and then they change something. Like, oh, I think I'm moving forward. I think I understand this. And then something comes in that you're like, well, no, maybe I need to go back and look, or just take what I've already learned and try to expand on it to get to what they just showed me.
And the thing that I'm working on now, and again, this comes to letting go and let divining timing work its magic, is I want to be in the position where I can sit down and have a discussion with my spirit guides. I'm not
Mhm.
there yet. I can Somebody once told me, it was funny, I kept having this image of a woman. I never would really see her face, but she was wearing like a long flowing white dress, and she had, similar hair to mine, long flowing red hair. And she would be running barefoot in what I would call like a flowery meadow type of thing. And this image kept coming back, coming back. And I was recently talking to a neighbor of mine who's, started being able to channel and whatnot. And she was sharing her journey with me. And I'm like, oh, that's really cool. I didn't know about it. And she says, okay, I want to sit down with you one time and practice. I'm like, yeah, I'd really like to be able to talk to my spirit guides and what have you. And she goes, have you met the person in the white dress yet?
Oh,
And
that's so
I'm,
validating.
and
I
I'm like,
love that.
yes. And she's like, that's your spirit guide. And she
That's really
says,
cool.
do you know her name yet? And as soon as she said that, I said, I don't know if she's told me her name, but the name that just popped into my head was Julie. And I'm like, and that's where it is. And that sort of comes and goes. And I get it. It's a muscle that you have to grow and sort of let it take its time. But my human self is still quite impatient, and I want to be like, I just want to sit down and have those conversations and just know that what's in my head isn't just me making crap up.
Right. And when I have experiences to this day, and I've only been walking my awakening for 3 years, but if I get a piece of information in, I will go to the internet to see if I can find that out there somewhere. If I have enough details just to confirm that that actually did happen. And yeah, it just blows my mind sometimes. And I have met some of my guides. I've seen like images in my mind's eye. And one day I'm connected with the sun. I see orbs when the sun is just right during the day. And I feel that connection with the sun. And so I was looking through some paperwork or something. I guess not paperwork, it was online. And I saw that Archangel Michael has a connection with the sun. And I'm like, oh, Well, that's really, really cool. So I'm like, well, maybe I need to get like an Archangel Michael coin or something so I can carry it with me. And I never really looked at his image before, but when I started seeing his image, he's who I've been seeing. And
Wow.
so I know he has been walking this path with me, and I've always felt very protected with that. But that's for me was like a big chunk of the puzzle fell into place, like the groundwork of it did. And I'm like, okay, I know that's who I've been seeing. I didn't know much about the archangels before. So that was really cool for me. That was really foundational, I would say.
For me, another thing I've been playing around with is what do you call it when you do the writing?
Automatic writing.
Yeah. Yeah. Another guest I had on the show said to me, try asking what does Lucy need to know? And then just start writing. And I've noticed more and more what because I journal every day. And I notice more and more my journaling. I'm starting to look at it. I'm writing, I'm not really thinking about it, and it's just sort of coming from somewhere. And when I stop and look at it, it's that's not something I would necessarily say. And a lot of it is coming out is, the wisdom behind everything that I'm doing. Like, why is the midlife woman so critical right now? What is she going through? And what does she need to know? And it just seems to be, I don't know, a download from somewhere that I'm getting. That's how I'm taking it right now. I don't know for sure, but I don't think it's stuff I'm just making up.
I don't think so either. And I had an experience back, I would guess 2018. I had been thinking about writing a children's book. I used to be a preschool teacher. And so one of my favorite times was reading stories with kids because if you get them involved, it's so much fun to watch their expressions and hear them make voices and things like that. So I wanted to write this children's book, and I had a concept in my mind, but I always left it there. I always was like, oh, I'll get to it when I have time. I kid you not. The universe decided it was time, and I was driving into Las Vegas, and that book started writing itself in my head. Like I could not get to the airport quick enough to start writing down these ideas and the flow of it. Like they were always there, but putting it on paper had been a challenge for me. And so I get that with the automatic writing, and also that question you always ask when you sit down to write. I always ask it in meditation. What do I need to know today?
Yeah. Yeah, it's powerful. It's yeah, at the beginning you do go, okay, what the hell is this? But again, you get comfortable with the uncomfortable, and then soon it becomes comfortable.
Yes. And do you find when you automatic write, sometimes your handwriting changes a little bit? Have you noticed that?
Only in the sense that it may get like it's still my writing, but it's call it bigger and bubblier,
Okay. That makes sense.
sort of not necessarily as tight or as big. I don't know.
That's kind of what mine does too. When I sit down and journal after meditation, like almost like it gets faster or bigger and a little bit sloppier, not
Yes,
so
because you
so
can't,
neat.
you're trying to get it out. And like sometimes you're like, okay, just slow down for a minute here. Like, I can't go that fast. But yeah, yeah. Oh no, it's interesting. It's interesting.
Yeah,
And
no, it's
that's
fascinating.
why we have to have these conversations, is because if we're not sharing these little things, then because you do want validation. And I think having these conversations and sharing these conversations is where we can validate our own experiences and also validate what other women are going through, because it can be, and it is scary and overwhelming and what have you.
And it really is a process of two steps forward, one step back.
Yeah.
And when my awakening started, I had nobody I could talk to about it. I didn't know anyone who just was stepping in there and wanting to have these conversations. And I was fortunate enough to find a Facebook group that I could follow. It was and get to know a little bit people from there. And then also I stepped into a training course. It was a 7-week course during COVID when I had the time to do it. And I have met so many supportive people, and I can have these conversations now. And I feel so blessed that it's come this far. I went from someone I didn't have anyone to talk to, being fearful of talking, to at least having a group of people I could talk and bounce ideas off of and have them say, "Oh, you're not crazy. You're not crazy at all."
And that's perfect. Having that support network, regardless of the journey that you're on, just having those like-minded people, that makes all the difference. It sort of gets away from that isolation and that uncertainty. It definitely helps. So wherever you can connect with those people, and I love having these conversations because it's so important for women. Now, Michelle, as we wrap up today, do you have any final words of wisdom that you would like to share with our listeners?
There is a quote that I love, and if I can just look real quick on my phone, I try to live my life by this quote. It is by Alexander Den Higger. I can't pronounce last name, but it's Hejjer, and it says, "To inspire people, don't show them your superpowers, show them theirs." And I really try to live my life by that. When I do my card readings for others, I want to lift up their beauty and magic. I want to hand it out to them so they can see it, they can know it, they can understand it, and then they'll share it. And it's just keeping them on path. It's highlighting what they already know, but just maybe need it to be reminded of. And then when they share it, it's that ripple positivity throughout the world. So I really do try to live my life by those words.
I love that quote. I love it. Now, to connect with Michelle, make sure you check out the show notes. I will have all of the links in there. And remember, if you're feeling lost, stuck, and confused in midlife, grab a copy of my guided journal, Your Journaling Journey. It's packed with tools to help you find clarity, guided prompts, affirmations, and gratitude. You can get Your Journaling Journey on Amazon. And I'd like to thank you, all of my listeners. And if you're listening to this podcast today and you are having your own spiritual awakening and you want to have a conversation about it, make sure you drop me an email. I would love to chat with you. I'd like to thank you for listening today. And Michelle, thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you. I really enjoyed chatting with you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Roller Coaster Podcast. Want to chat or share your ideas about today's show? Pop me an email at hello@therollercoasterpodcast.com. Don't forget to connect with me on Facebook and Instagram at The Roller Coaster Podcast. Our theme song, Roller Coaster, was performed by The Lucky Setback. Audio editing by the one and only Jeff Quigley of Quigley Creative.
Life is like a roller coaster, baby, baby. I wanna ride, 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 ride. Life is like